Hell with Vince McMahon. I don't need him.
Radiation is a curious thing. No one expects what it would bring from society.
Well, hello. Here we are again for another edition of Kato Reviews on an interview. But first, I'm looking good, feeling good, loving life. I hope that you can say the same. Today, my guest, he has many names. I'm going to read them off for you. Some call him Mantis. Some call him Bobby Williams. Some call him Robert Parker Williams. I've heard the name Bobby Digital.
A couple of times.
And Harold Potter. Today, my guest, Bobby Williams.
Thanks for having me.
How are you today?
Living the dream.
Good. Let's jump right into it. Mm-hmm. How did the love of wrestling start for you?
So I'm going to go back way before I was even born. My grandfather was a Homestead police officer in the town where I'm from, Homestead, Pennsylvania. And one of his close friends was known as Izzy Moydell. He was a referee of the studio wrestling era. So he would go down and work security for studio wrestling. Took my dad, all of his brothers and sisters. So over the years, they started developing relationships with some of the big name stars. My grandfather, more specifically, used to drive Haystacks Calhoun all around town. Whenever he would come in from the bus, he'd pick him up and take him to wherever. So we'll fast forward to when I was born. Literally, wrestling was on all the time. I don't remember a time when I didn't watch wrestling. So it started all from my father.
When you started watching, was there some of the guys or girls that you really enjoyed? Were some of your favorites growing up?
I was a Hulkamaniac for sure. Hogan, Bret Hart, and I loved Davey Boy. Everything about him was just fantastic. His presence, his style, just everything about the British Bulldog. I think he was probably my favorite. And then as I got a little bit older, I started getting infatuated with Ric Flair and Curt Hennig. Hence the reason why Robert Parker Williams is who he is. You thank Ric Flair and Curt Hennig for that one.
What sort of attracted you to these particular characters or guys?
Bulldog for sure, from just his in-ring style, just how he can do it all. There wasn't anything that Bulldog couldn't do that I didn't get drawn into. Him and Bret Hart, SummerSlam, hands down, greatest match ever. And everything about that is just the storytelling in that was just fantastic. And when I get older, I got into Flair because of the character. Just how much of an asshole he was, his promos, how he didn't have to do too much in most of his promos, and it drew you into the TV screen.
What about independent wrestling? When did you first learn about it?
So I was in middle school, and my brother and I used to stay up late. We watched the standard, Shotgun Saturday Night, ECW, PWX. It was always on TV. So I had no idea that it existed in Pittsburgh. I was in high school, and Steel Valley High School, graduate Tarantula. Knew him from town and found out at lunch one day that there was wrestling coming to our high school. So I ripped the flyer down, I came home, and I said, look at this. Pro wrestling on Friday here at school. We gotta go. I told my brother, I'm like, man, let's do this. So we went. And next thing I know, I'm just like, holy crap, this exists in our town? So that was my first show. After that, I had no idea where PWX ran because I didn't have the internet at the time. I didn't have any form of communication with anybody that knew about PWX. We used to go to Eastland Mall just to go to the flea markets. I used to collect baseball cards. My brother collected comic books. So we would go there, and I used to trade cards with this one guy. And outside of the flea market was a mall. And in the mall, we were just walking through, and there's a bunch of different stores. There was a candy store, there was a shoe store, there was a five and dime. And then, I swear to God, this was true story. My sister was walking hand in hand with my dad, and she just started running off from him. and she ran into a ring post. It was like this ring post magically appeared out of nowhere, and there it was right in front of me. It was a wrestling ring just sitting right there in the middle of this mall. Next thing you know, Jim Miller walks out, and he's putting up some chairs, and they told us that there's going to be a wrestling match here tonight. I told my dad, I'm like, we gotta go. And next thing you know, we get hit with a blizzard. So again, 3 or 4 months later, there was a time when wrestling came back through, and here I found out about PWX again. Started going religiously to every PWX show.
How long was the period between when you first started going to PWX and the time when you maybe got involved in the business itself?
So I started regularly attending PWX shows in 1997. I was 11 years old.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I sat front row. You walk down the ramp. Champ sat in the first seat. I sat in the next seat, right next to Champ. On the other side of Champ, on the other side of the entranceway was White Trash Hero, All Business Brant. On the other side of the ring was CJ Sensation, Dean Radford, Damian Stockholm, Scotty Gash. But yeah, from 97 regularly up until 2000 when I got into some trouble.
So we have this 3-year period where you're watching PWX and independent wrestling. Was there some favorites from that period that you really enjoyed?
Absolutely. I was a huge fan of Rage. Samu, Quinn Magnum, Mad Mike. They were the cool guys. Then there was 987, Boomer Payne, JB Destiny, Big Papa Gator. Their feud over the course of 1998 was probably one of the greatest feuds in Pittsburgh wrestling. The animosity that they created amongst each other, the storytelling that they had, and just their overall matches. Any combination of those 6 guys in the ring together was unbelievable. It all built to a weapons match. And I remember one weapons match, I saved some kid's life. He was sitting next to me, stood up. Everybody's fighting right in front of me. And JB Destiny jumps off the top rope, does a dive onto Big Papa Gator and Samu and Quinn Magnum, and they start falling. And this kid is standing right underneath Gator. I says, this kid's going to die.
Mm-hmm.
Pushed him right out the way, and they fell on me. But that was some of my favorites. And one of my favorite moments ever in PWX, not from 98, 99, Big Schmaz finished to end this one really hot summer show. Bubba is in the ring, Boomer's in the ring, Gator's in the ring. There's just a melee all throughout this building. Next thing you know, Perfect Strangers hits. Everybody's like shaking their heads like, what is this? Everybody's on their feet. Shane Douglas runs through the front door with a wooden chair, starts blasting everybody with this wooden chair, and cuts one of the greatest promos I've ever heard live, standing right in front of me. PWX used to do a little TV show with Harley Race's World Legion Wrestling, and they had it on their intro for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm standing right next to Shane, just jumping up and down, going absolutely berserk for it. So that's one of my favorite PWX moments right there. But on other guys that I really enjoyed was Sean Evans. A guy by the name of Chris Hero, who used to wrestle a lot in PWX, and I really liked Yutzak Too Fat Arafat.
I remember that name.
Not too many people remember him because he was a character. I absolutely loved characters. Hence the reason why every wrestling character that I've portrayed had a backstory, had a character. But there was just something about him that drew me in because of just the over-the-topness and just the cheesy heel stuff that he would do. And I think he went on to be a WWE writer for several years, I think during the Attitude Era. But yeah, that was one of the other guys that I really enjoyed.
How do you go from being a fan for those 3 years to being somebody that works inside the business?
Okay, so this is a little bit of a long story here. I'm in middle school at the time, and I'm taking this class. It was a digital communications class. We learned graphic design, web design, and just like how to put things together. One of my projects for the entire year was I had to build and maintain a website. So I started working on a independent wrestling website locally for Pittsburgh. So I would cover PWX, FNW, and Steel City Wrestling. My brother and one of his buddies were hanging out. They would do all kinds of goofy stuff. His friend was telling me one day about this guy that wrestled locally, and that he was doing this stuff that has never been seen before in Pittsburgh wrestling, which caught my eye. He started telling me about all these flips and high spots, and him and his buddy that trained together are just innovators in the Pittsburgh area. So he introduced me to him one day. His name was James Fawcett. Most people know him now as Devil Bhudakahn. So it was Devil and Super Hentai, who at the time was 747 was his wrestling name. They were just doing all these like outlaw shows, like Joe Perry shows, and my mom worked at Giant Eagle, and there was another guy that worked at Giant Eagle that was a local wrestler named Greg Wallace. They had a company picnic every year, so they brought the ring and they put on these matches for this picnic, and one of the matches was 747 versus Vince Viper, Devil Bhudakahn without the mask on. And that's my first introduction to Jimmy. And from that point on, we were inseparable. He would call me, "Hey, I have an idea for you. What do you think?" I was like, "Okay, what's the idea?" He's like, "I need somebody to do a website for me. I heard that you're doing some stuff with web design, and I would like to bring you along to some of my shows and just log my matches, take some pictures, and just put together like a little website that I can try to promote myself with." Sure. So I got to work, and from that point on, the rest is pretty much history. I went with him to every PWX, PWL, Steel City, FNW, IWC, CWF, whatever show that he was on, I was there. Probably about 2 years of doing this. He's like, "Bob," he's like, "I've never paid you a dime. You've never asked me for anything. What is it that I can do for you since you've done all this for me?" I says, "Well, I want to learn." He says, "Okay." So, one very cold March day, I was 14 years old. I walked into Joe Perry's wrestling school in his back warehouse in Penn Hills. And he introduced me to Joe, who I've remembered as a kid watching on PWX TV. And he's like, "Kid, I'm going to make you a wrestler." It's that classic, like, old school promoter. "I just need, you got to pay me $100 a month, or you come with me on the road, you set up my ring. Every time you set up my ring, I knock $20 off a month." So I should have been getting paid to train, because I was going to every show with Joe Perry that I possibly could. So I paid $100 to train at Joe's school, and Jimmy just started teaching me everything. There was a little sidebar story. It took a little while for my parents to actually allow me to train, because I was only 14. State of Pennsylvania, you have to be 18 to take a bump, or most promoters won't let you train until you're about 17 or 18. I'm 14. So my dad used to travel a lot for work. He worked in steel mills, building up all these mills, and he was a bricklayer. So he was on a job in Detroit. He was sitting at in an airport waiting for his flight, and he walked over to get a bite to eat, and who's sitting there? Al Snow. So he goes over and gets an autograph, and he's like, "I got a question to ask you, and I just don't want to bother you." But he's like, "Sure, what's going on?" He's like, "I got this kid. He's 14. He wants to train to wrestle. What kind of advice can you give him to maybe, or give me to maybe, like, yay or nay this?" He's like, "You know what?" He's like, if this kid wants a future in wrestling, start him off now. Start him young. Give him get a reputable trainer, and just see what happens. So my dad came home from that trip, and he pulled me aside and he said, "Look," he's like, "I'm okay with this. I'm gonna let you do this." And that's when I got the green light to start taking bumps and actually train to wrestle.
So did you initially train to wrestle or referee?
Jimmy didn't want me to wrestle at first, because I was so young. he wanted to make sure that my parents were cool with it, and he was going to see that I wasn't going to get hurt. So I started training as a referee. I mean, I was 5'8", maybe 100 pounds. So like, I was a skinny guy. So he didn't want me getting hurt. So I just started off just referee training. Joe Perry was like kind of showing me some stuff like here and there, but I didn't listen to what Joe had to say. I listened to Jimmy, and he would work out with a guy you might be familiar with, El Tiburon.
Sure.
El Tiburon used to come in and work out with him because I think Jimmy was working up in Punxsutawney with Tib at the time, and Glenn Spector was also in the class, and a couple other guys that Real Smooth, BC Steel, and then this other kid. His first name was Dave, but we knew him as Mullet. He had an unfortunate accident one day at practice, and to date, I think he's had like something like 100,000 seizures since then.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, freak accident.
Wow. So I know we're sort of jumping ahead here a little bit, but you brought him up. Devil Bhudakahn. How did it affect you, his passing?
Well, I fell into a very, very dark place in my life. It was an awful circumstance, an awful situation. I'm not going to get into like the meat of it because it's obvious. I mean, it's out there. Everybody knows what happened. But yeah, it really tore me up because not too many people know like what really happened. But tomorrow's the anniversary, and it's been 11 years, and it's a day that goes through my head every day. I've been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder because of it. You know, I was on medication for a long time, and I actually just had this conversation with my wife the other day. I said, you know what? I said, I think I'm okay now. Like, I think I'm dealing with it better now than I did back then because, you know, I had a lot of time to think and a lot of time to reflect. And it's a situation that sucks because to me, he was one of the best pro wrestlers in this area, and it's sad that most of the young generation that are coming up now have no idea who he is, has never experienced Devil Bhudakahn and Super Hentai. What they've done for this area to allow guys like me, my size, to achieve a dream, to become a pro wrestler.
So let's move on to something hopefully a little more happy. When you first started being on the shows, whether it be a ref or a wrestler, what were your initial memories of being on shows?
My very first show was May 26, 2001, Weirton, West Virginia. And I was sick to my stomach leading up to that show. It was so nerve-wracking being in the car, driving down there, and going out in front of a crowd that I've never seen before. I'm in a whole new state I've never been to, and I was terrified. I had no business being in the ring. No, not for another 6 months. I wasn't ready for it. I had no clue what I was getting myself into.
Whose decision was it for you to be in the ring?
I unfortunately worked for a guy named Aaron Lester.
Okay.
He needed a couple of referees. Devil gave me the green light to go ahead and try it. It was going to be under the direction of a couple guys that Jimmy was familiar with, that they can keep an eye on me. Jake Garrett, JT Rogers, and Eric Ecstasy. So the unspoken, like, watch this kid, make sure he's okay, and we'll see what happens. The only way you learn is you go out there and do it. So, I mean,
Was this a match or refereeing?
I was refereeing.
Okay.
Yeah, I refereed a couple of matches, and they ended up doing some TV taping for Aaron Lester's 3RW TV that he had on Sunday mornings. But man, I shouldn't have been out there.
Do you have any memories of your first match?
My first wrestling match?
Yes.
So my first wrestling match was a year and a half later. Rick Barncourt was promoting these partner shows with a bunch of random people. This guy named Backups Bob Smith. He ended up dying a few years after. Bishop Slade was another one of the guys that were involved. So we were doing a referee angle between me and Ben BC, and our first match was against each other in front of 20 people, one of which was Shima Zion, who's in front row. But it was awful. Like going back and watching it, like we thought it was the greatest thing ever, but you go back and watch it, it was like, oh my god, what the heck are we doing?
If we could send you back in time, either to your first referee gig or your first match, and you today could walk up to that kid and give them any type of advice for the future, what would you tell them?
Take your glasses off, you look ridiculous. Take your watch off, you shouldn't be wearing a watch. And then paying attention to what's going on in the ring and show some personality. I was so stiff and just timid. I mean, everything that you can think would go wrong did. My counts were so light. As far as wrestling, I mean, it was a comedy match, so like, we did too much for referees. I think we hit every Fed finisher at the time. But then again, we had some help putting the match together.
Mm-hmm.
And, they thought it would be a good idea to do all these sequences with stunners and rock bottoms and all that stuff because it was the time frame. So
right.
But yeah, I think I would have told myself to maybe stop for a second and think about what you're doing and just slowing down a little bit.
Sure. So your history here at Western PA sort of fascinates me because you were able to work as a wrestler at PWX and a referee at IWC at the same time when guys weren't allowed to do that. Mm-hmm. So how did that come about? How did you pull that off?
Here's how I pulled it off.